Welcome, and thank you for joining our guest speakers today in their discussion of online data and its role in defining winners and losers in economic development. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our partner eSolutionsGroup for sponsoring the session today.
Well, thank you, and excited to spend a few minutes with everybody here today talking about how data and the internet are defining winners and losers in economic development. My goal today is to provide a few tips on how to make your website a little bit more user-friendly, especially in today's climate where everything is turned so digital, and we're relying more and more on the internet to kind of effectively communicate not only internally but externally with our clients and our prospects. So I'd like to just kind of start with some larger facts and figures. About 7.7 billion people in the world today. About 4.4 billion of those have some form of internet usage. 3.4, over 75% of those have some social media involvement or use some sort of social media platform. And they're spending 142 minutes a day on those social media platforms. 81% of businesses communicate or have some form of social media or use social media to communicate about themselves. It's kind of an interesting, back in 2000, our average attention span was 12 seconds. 2019, last year, our average attention span was just about 8 seconds. And for some perspective, the average attention span of a goldfish is about 9 seconds. So we need to really get our message across and get our message across quickly. So how does this relate to economic development? Infographics, so visualization of data, shared more on social media, 3 times more than any other type of content. So being able to use pictures and show or get your story or your message out there visually to your audience or your client base is very, very important. Mobile. Last year, 58% of all website visits were from mobile devices. I think probably each of you on this webinar today probably touching a website via mobile device. And just to give you a little kind of internal numbers that we see here at GIS Planning, 35 to 40% of all of our web traffic comes via a mobile device. So mobile devices, because we know, but we can never drive it home enough. They're more and more important, and we're spending more and more time using our mobile device to generate or to look for content. And just one other kind of interesting fact internally for us, the applications that we provide worldwide, over 1 million views on those applications. So you think half of those or more, or 40% of those are also coming from a mobile device. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the mobile friendliness of your website as we go through the presentation. So what does all this mean? It's time to get your website ready. And so I want to share with you a few tips on how we could do that. So sometimes this feels like it could be overwhelming. So we'll just go through 10 or so different tips on where to begin and things that you guys can do. So here we go. Data, accurately and updated, customizable data, robust, relevant, interactive and dynamic, granular, visually presented so the website user can actually get to it, exporting and sharing it, making your data easily tracked and analyzed, and again, fully optimized for mobile. We'll touch on each one of these and give you a few tips on each one of these classifications here. So, accurate, updated, and sourced. We see websites all the time where they have data out there. It could be good data, but we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know how old it is. And so really being able to tell the picture or tell your story with data, but also give your website users some context. of when this data is. I mean, we'll run into places where data is 5+ years old. So do everything you can to try and get the most accurate and updated data, and then also tell your user where it's coming from so they understand this is a StatsCan set of data, or it's a third-party data set that's updated on a regular basis. And so just be able to show the user, be able to not only use the data, but be able to give them some context on where that data is coming from. Customizable. So this is some data that we have here. Actually, Chris will talk maybe a little bit more about this too when he talks. This is just an example of foreign direct investment, but the larger picture here is allow the user to be able to control how they consume the data. So some examples of kind of customization might be, raw numbers versus percentages. People like to look at data different ways. And so give them the tools or the ability to look at the same piece of data in different ways. Maybe they want to look at it, data visualization through a heat map or something like that. Again, it's the same piece of data, but it's displayed a number of different ways. Maybe they want to be able to define the area that they're looking in. So allow the website user to kind of customize the way that they look at data. There's a quote from a site selector. One of the most useful components of a website is current and well-maintained sites and buildings. And that data could be coupled with additional data like workforce, business, infrastructure. It provides a leg up on the competition. So these are becoming more and more commonplace these days, and being able to have these sorts of data sets out there allows you to kind of stay in the forefront when folks are coming to your website. Robust. So this is something that over the years, the 20 years that we've been doing this at GIS planning, kind of the data sets and the things that our clients and website users have provided us feedback. So things like demographics, labor data, consumer and retail data, how people are spending their money, businesses. It's not just enough to have the top 10 businesses in your community. Geographic data, so if there are target incentive areas or development areas or areas of your community that you're trying to promote, and make sure you keep the data current. Again, this is going to be a redundant theme throughout my part of this presentation, is keep your data current. Another quote from Gray here, that data is your community's first impression. It's at your fingertips and can be viewed by all. So it's critical for the economic development professional to understand the story your data is telling. It's the missing chapters that you have to write to be successful. And we'll touch even a little bit more on that here in a second, because data needs to be relevant, right? So you can find an available site or building anywhere in any community. So they want to know why, site selectors, business decision makers, they want to know why to choose your location. So use the data to tell the story. What can you offer? What's different? And one of the things that we come across too is, economic developers may perceive a negative data set. Maybe you have high unemployment in your community, but that also may be a positive for a business who is looking to relocate in your community, or a business that's looking to start up. They know that there's, an available workforce there. So don't be afraid to take data that you may think is negative in your story, but use it as a positive, right? That's how we as economic developers are able to do our jobs better, right? The community may think this is bad, but we figure out a way to make this data good. So there's another just quote from another site selector, quality buildings and sites product, and the assets. Having the assets on the economic development website is the most productive activity any economic developer can undertake. Interactive and dynamic. So again, this sort of relates back to some of the data we were talking about earlier, but allowing the user to define the way that they want to look at data. Compare, maybe a compare community feature where you can compare your community against another community you might be working for or working against in a site selection deal. Or being able to tell that story to the business that's thinking about moving somewhere else out of your community. Again, we're starting to focus a lot more on business retention now than we ever have, and business, keeping the businesses local and keeping them here. So a couple other things, just PDFs. We have a lot of PDFs. I think we're trying to get out of the world of just allowing static PDF documents to reside on your website as well too. Granular. So this is very interesting. Allow the website user to get into more localized data sets. So if you're at the provincial level, show the communities that are in your province. If you're regional, show not only your regional data, but provide options at looking at counties, cities, towns, and make that data interactive. And then allow it to go down to the micro level, census dissemination area. The closer we can get the data sets or the lower levels of geography, the better analysis that we can have when we start to use those interactive analytical components. Visual. So presenting this data visually is very important. So we can look at spreadsheets till we're blue in the face, right? I mean, we're looking at an example right here. So would you rather look at something like this, or maybe something that's a little bit more visual? We do much better retaining data in this visual environment. Now, there are some folks out there that spreadsheets and that kind of stuff is the way they like to consume data. But for the most part, our research and what we're seeing is that folks retain data better when it's provided in a more visual nature, as opposed to maybe a bunch of columns and a bunch of rows on a spreadsheet. Easily exported and shared. So be able or allow your website user to take data off of the site, allow them to use it in other places, but also be able to export it to social media platforms. Again, we talked about 3.4 billion folks have social media, and 81% of businesses are using a social media platform. So they're up to speed on this kind of stuff. So use social media to help tell your story, and use the data that you have to help tell your story through the social media platforms. So make this easy. Make it easy not only for yourself, but for your website users to get the data off of the application. Why aren't we getting any attention? So do you feel like sometimes your website has low traffic, or people aren't filling out the contact us form? So use the analytics. This is maybe one of the hidden gems here, being able to understand who's coming to your website. And there are, your Google Analytics that you can use, but there's also third-party software that dives even deeper. They use reverse IP address to give you information on what folks are looking at, where they're coming from. Does this tie into some event or some marketing campaign that you did? What are they looking at? Who are they? Again, this is one of those things where I think from an economic development standpoint, it's one thing to build the website and have the forward-facing piece, but using the analytical components of the application, the back-end stuff, the stuff that only you can see, is very important. So use these tools. Use this as a tool to be able to kind of continue your business development efforts. And then again, we've kind of harped on this a lot here, but fully optimized for mobile. We saw the numbers earlier on how many folks are using their mobile devices to connect to the internet. But make sure your website is not just a rehash of the full desktop version. Allow for searches or data to be able to get off it. But just make sure that your website is fully optimized for mobile. I have a couple bonus ones for you. Make your data easy to find. It doesn't need to be 6-7 clicks down through the application. Make it easy to find. Don't make the website user dig and dig and dig. Remember, we talked about our attention spans and how short we are, and probably take it everyday life, where if you can't find something quick, you're moving on to the next thing. So, and then the final bonus one, contact information. This is very important. We run into this all the time, info@community or whatever it is, filling out forms for contact information, that kind of stuff. Give me your email address, cell phone. and sometimes even a photo so I know who I'm looking at. I mean, think about today's environment with all those Zoom meetings that we're doing. Everyone's turning on their cameras these days, for better or for worse. You know, people want to have that interaction. So even a photo of yourself on the website is something that can be very, very valuable. So that's what winning looks like. And so I know there will be questions later, but I am going to turn this over to Chris Knight for the second part of this presentation.
Okay, so I'm now going to move on and I'm going to show you how you can use data to help in your business attraction efforts and in terms of your international strategy. So I decided to get data up to today so we can really take a look at what has gone on with COVID. See, you know, are things as bad as we read every day, what the resilient sectors are, which markets we should be looking at. And I'm going to base this on data to show the importance. So if we begin by looking at the impact of COVID on FDI, and the first slide here, you'll see I've done a monthly breakdown on where we are in comparison to the same period last year. So you can see as at the onset, we were being hit by about 20%, dropped to 48% in March, and you see it's just got worse. So this data is live up until the 2nd of November, and the last 2 months are an estimate. So altogether, we can see if we look at greenfield FDI in 2020, that's down 30%. But if you look at FDI flows, like UNCTAD are stating, it's down 40%. So what's the difference? Well, FDI flows, it's going to include your mergers and acquisitions. So what we're seeing is companies now are doing, they're still investing overseas, but the projects are much smaller and there's less M&A. Note, these results, they don't take into account November, December, the second wave, which is starting to hit Europe right now, and you know, possibly the US elections, which may result in downward revisions. But as everyone knows, aftercare has become much more important at this time. And I just wanted to throw some data out to show that. And I took two of the hottest sectors in medical devices and life sciences, and we're looking at the percentage of FDI jobs created by expansions in these industries this year. And we can see this year we're hitting over 50% jobs coming in medical devices. So it's a huge number of new jobs coming from expansions. But what does the future hold? Because I guess most people, you know, listening will be looking at attracting foreign investors and wanting to know, well, what are they thinking of doing? So what we have looked at is the intent of companies. And this is coming from the Financial Times FDI Markets database, which tracks signals of companies wanting to invest overseas. So we can see last year, 21.2% of companies considering Western Europe compared to 23.3% this year. With North America, 21.2% up to 23.7%. So what we believe this is showing is early signs of regionalization and reshoring of production and supply chains away from Asia, moving more towards the US and Europe. And this is what companies are thinking of. And currently it's about a 10% increase in FDI. You know, this may look low, but it is not an insignificant amount when you think of what global FDI is. And we'll be looking at that soon. And again, I'll put the caveat that this is still year to date and things can change with the second wave of the virus that Europe is having right now. Okay, so the million-dollar question, when will the FDI market recover? Well, what we've looked at is we've decided to do some FDI forecasts to take a look at, you know, when we think it's going to come back. And we've done a 5-year forecast, and we believe it will, this is in terms of project numbers, we believe it will take 5 years before we're back to the same period as last year. So it's going to be 2024, 2025 before we hit that level. But more interesting, when we look at jobs and capital forecasts, you know, we can see that FDI reached its peak of 2.78 million new jobs and over $1 trillion of announced greenfield FDI in 2018. So greenfield FDI continued to decline starting in 2019 as the world economy slowed and with the growing trade tensions, etc. So while we can see this year there's been a large decline, we still are looking at about 1.73 million new jobs created by FDI and about 600, just over 600 billion of investment. So there are still projects out there. The shape and the sectors of them are changing right now, but there are still opportunities. So we expect from next year we'll start to move into a bit of a recovery. Hopefully there will be a vaccine and companies will proceed with their FDI plans, but we don't believe we will get back to the 2018 peak within the next 5 years. Just with the shape of projects, a lot will be, spending less because there will people be working at home. Maybe less jobs will be created, more will be done remotely. So we think to get to these levels will be very difficult within the next 5 years. So what sectors are going to drive this recovery? Well, looking at the Site Selectors Guild survey, where they're asking which sectors people believe will be the first to come back and the most likely to grow. Not surprising, 68% of people are saying life sciences, 48% into transportation, then advanced manufacturing. These are what really looking at North American focus, what people believe. But WavTech, we decided, we did a survey with about 170 IPAs or EDOs on it, where we were asking what their opinions are, which sectors they think are going to be the ones to come back and grow the fastest. And 74% of IPAs, and this is from everywhere in the world, believe it's life sciences, followed by ICT, followed by agribusiness, which is what you would expect. We don't want to get into the same position as before. We want to have PPE equipment. We don't want supply chains disrupted. And we've seen throughout lockdown, ICT, e-commerce, the growth of companies such as Amazon, Alibaba, agribusiness, food. Food is always going to be important. People are going to want to source locally in case there is another lockdown with lack of travel and imports. So this is logical order they're looking at. So we decided as a company to look a little further and go drill down into the real niches that we believe are going to be the ones to watch within the next 1 to 2 years. I've already mentioned e-commerce, but medtech is going to be important. You look at edtech, and I was even speaking to an island in the Caribbean, and they were saying that, with COVID, a lot of students are able to remain at home, so they're not having to travel to the US. So the diaspora is remaining, and they think that will start a startup culture. Even at WavTech, we have created our e-learning platform because we think training, even in the FDI world, is going to become online at this time. We hear about fintech, cybersecurity, online video gaming. I was reading today that so in the UK, we've just gone into a second lockdown and everyone is buying up video games. So it's a real booming sector right now. Artificial intelligence, clean tech, all continuing to grow. We've deep dived into some of these so far, like cybersecurity, ag tech, fintech, and digital health. If you go to the link, you can download those all for free if you want to take a look. So looking at our forecasts, we decided to do forecasts on sectors to see which sectors we think are going to grow. So this is, we started off by taking a look at the growth rate between 2016 and 2019. And then with COVID, we applied a deviation for which sectors were the most resilient. And over the next 5 years, we expect the fastest growth in things like renewable energy and pharmaceuticals, hotels. This is in terms of projects. But if we look at what the jobs are in, again, I think it's interesting to look at hotels and tourism. I think the growth in that is also partly due to the huge decline it has witnessed, in the past year. So it still won't get back to the figures we were at last year, but it is going to continue to grow. So the forecast for 2025, it's still nearly 20% below 2019 levels. So we don't expect it to fully recover in the next few years. A lot of people will be more adverse to traveling. I think As Aaron will touch on now, there'll be maybe less site visits. People will be using technology more to be doing this and not jumping in on a flight quite as quickly. So which markets are going to drive the recovery? So if you're looking to target FDI, where should you be looking? How is this changing? So again, we decided to ask IPAs, which countries do they think have the best potential for FDI in the next 12 months? So this is coming from about 150 IPAs. Number one, they think China, followed by Germany, followed by the US. So really here we're seeing the global view of IPAs. You know, it's very interesting. I think it seems to show more about how China and Germany have handled the pandemic rather than purely the numbers of FDI, because if it's purely who's got the leading source market, then the US would come number one. But I think China, Germany have been seen to handle a pandemic in a better way. If we then look at which markets are going to be the fastest growing markets for FDI. So here what we've done is our forecasts, we base these on historical trend growth rates, also the forecasted global growth in the different sectors and the strength of each source country in each sector to see a real feel for which countries are going to grow as a source market. So we can see Malaysia and Thailand, that's from a relatively low base. So, you know, I think it's more interesting when we look below that. We then have got China, Austria, which a lot of people don't historically target, Mexico, South Korea, Taiwan. I'm hearing a lot from North America, a lot of people starting to look at Taiwan. But what I find the most interesting is when we look at the top 10 or 15, how many are from Asia right now? You have Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea, Taiwan, India, Hong Kong, Japan, all within the top 10. So forecasts are showing that Asia, there's going to be a continued boom as a source market for FDI, and it's one that we should be looking out for. So we believe there's 4 key factors to look at the drive of the recovery of FDI into your location, because it's not going to be uniform. Not everybody's going to come out of this at the same time. So firstly, the destination country. So it will depend on what investors' confidence is in how you've contained COVID-19 and also how businesses are opening up again, both new and expansions. You then have the source market, you know, so has the source of this FDI, is there a country opened up for business? And are there flights from this location to your location, resumes and project implementation? So I think these basics have to be there before you'll see that ramp up in FDI. And we also believe, as a tip from us, is we think looking at the destination and source, that there is potential for bilateral trade in intermediate goods. So it could be a starting point for IPAs to look at what companies or suppliers from the source country that could consider relocating to their destination. So it could begin with suppliers in critical sectors, maybe, you know, PPE, as I mentioned before, taking a look at some of these sectors. And even for the IPAs on this, as an aftercare practice, it could be useful to check with your existing investors about their sourcing plans, where they're getting their materials, because you could look into that. I think then there's sector specialization. So it's really seeing which of these resilient sectors your location is strong in, to look at that. And then finally, policies. You know, a lot of governments we're hearing now are putting different COVID incentive policies in place. There's also travel bubbles being put in place. This is all going to affect where companies decide to locate. So just really quickly to finish up, you know, in terms of the data, I think all of this stuff I've talked about, all of this data comes into the changing face of marketing, which Russ touched upon. You know, now, pre-COVID, you were doing trade, we would be doing this in person. You would travel to meet investors, host site visits, farm tours, all of these things would be done. But the world has changed. Now we're hosting webinars, we're doing virtual meetings, virtual conferences, virtual reality. You know, virtual is the key word now. And the IPAs which get involved in that the quickest are going to be the most successful. You even see in Europe and Middle East, virtual registrations for companies, you don't need to travel to register a company, which allows a company to continue to grow without having to visit. So if I had to make a final recommendation on an action plan to apply during and post-COVID, and this is something we've been doing for maybe 10 to 15 countries around the world, it would be, firstly, work on an interim market strategy, because what worked before will not currently work. So if you've got a 5-year marketing strategy, I think you should put it on a shelf and work on what you're going to do in the next 1 to 2 years, you know, to look at which markets are opening up, how to engage with companies there, and how to get these investors to the next level of setting up. And that's where data is going to come into play a lot. Companies are going to need to rely on the data you provide, and it's going to need to be more up to date, you know, with COVID and the responses to that. I think investing in digital tools, because investors are still out there. They're now looking at your location virtually. You know, digital tools can be software tracking to see who's coming on your website, you know, linking things through to your CRM, and looking at analytics and virtual reality, and even Zoom webinars, virtual missions. All of these digital tools are becoming more important. I think this is also a time to try new things. You know, I'm sure a lot of you will have had travel budget this year. I would be experimenting with that, you know, putting some investment possibly into, say, LinkedIn marketing and some social media marketing, and just test what works for you. And then you can add this to your marketing strategy moving forward. And finally, I think it's even more important than ever to update your value propositions, because, you know, what I seen this time last year, it typically was, this is how many people we have a workforce in IT. It was, we are centrally located, our quality of life. I think people's wants and needs have changed now. Now we're working virtually. A lot of people, quality of life is now the #1 factor, and you need to play on that. We're even getting people asking, you know, for WeWork or for shared service offices, are they COVID ready? So a lot of small businesses like myself, we cannot afford to do like deep cleaning every day, to have PPE equipment. So we want to move into an office which is ready for me. And I think that's the sort of inquiries you're going to get now. So your value propositions need to recognize that. And I think they also need to go a bit deeper than, say, financial services. They now need to go down to that niche. You know, what part of it are you in? Is it blockchain, cybersecurity, fintech? And really drill down to that, because that is what an investor is now asking us for when we're doing lead generation on your behalf. So again, I'll be there to answer any questions, but there's my details if you want to send any questions through. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Aaron.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to be taking a little twist from what Russ had shared and Chris had shared to talk about some of the data that is virtual, and some of the data that's more visual, I should say, that has been virtual. And looking at virtual reality as a new way to address some of the things that Chris was just talking about. We have to try new things. We have to be able to present ourselves virtually. And my company, Golden Shovel Agency and Place VR, we've been working on this for the last few years. When we started, our first introduction or release of our technology was in 2017. It was in October at the IDC conference. And at the time, the only options for really utilizing virtual reality was either a cell phone that could go inside a cardboard piece like a Google Cardboard setup, or you had to have something like you see here, a PlayStation 4 setup, and it had a camera. It could all fit into a briefcase. It was cool because you could take it with you to a trade show or take it with you to a conference and set it up. But it was a little intimidating, and it looked a little bit like the helmet from Tron. So in these very, very few years, the technology has accelerated just at lightning speed. At the time when we released this, that's what was there, but only a handful of months later, in May of the following year, came the Oculus Go, which was the first wireless headset. Now it's 2020, it's October, and 2 weeks ago, they just unveiled this. This is called the Oculus Quest 2, and this is the new headset from Oculus. It allows us to like actually not only be wireless, you don't have to connect it to a computer or something of that sort, be able to look at sites and visuals in a 4K and actually at a really, really high resolution. It creates this feeling of being there. The reason we started in on virtual reality for economic development is because of this trick of the brain that happens when viewing what's called a 360 video or a spherical video. Your brain gets fooled into thinking it's visiting to a new place, and there's actually a biological response to that. It opens up receptors and allows you to take in information and retain it longer than other forms of media where you're relaxed hanging out in your office. So that's the magic, I like to call the magic of VR. And it allows you, gives you this sense of presence, like you're standing there. And in a time when it's very difficult to travel, you want to create that feeling of somebody being there, because no one's going to be moving their business or moving their family unless they actually can visit a place. Now that's Greg Kolbjornsen. He is our executive producer behind the VR videos. You can see some of the different cameras that he's holding. The one on the left is an original one that was called a GoPro Omni rig. Came out at about $5,000 to get a camera of that sort. The one on the right is about $1,000 and connects together and can actually has an built-in stabilizer. You can see it's actually on a boat in this case. That once again, the camera technology is changing so quickly. Now, since we're focusing on economic development, our main focus are on familiarization tours, going to a community and looking at what kind of businesses are a good fit for the region, what are the workforce programs like, the universities like, what are the neighborhoods like, what about all of the quality of life and things to do in the region that are going to be great, and then capturing some of the downtowns or major events. Everything you'd want to bring a site consultant on for a FAM tour. Another big focus has been on site tours and being able to particularly visualize how a site might be developed. And I'll spend some time showing you some examples of that today. Other uses are workforce attraction, certainly, and even talent attraction. If you have major employers in your community that really need to get certain types of people, this is a way to show people what it's like to be on a factory floor without any of the having to take the safety considerations at a job fair, and naturally tourism. And so the way they've been using these 360 videos is you can certainly the best experience and that immersive trick of the brain happens inside a VR headset, but you can also see them on mobile. You can put them on your website and look at them from there. You can see you can look all around, so it's spherical. So if I have my headset on, I can look up, down, left, right. I can go visit these different places as if I'm standing there on a tour. We've been experimenting a lot with drones and how to use those to make different perspectives. And then particularly on building visualizations. How do you take a brownfield site and create the experience of standing there on a property? And this has been, especially since COVID, a major focus of ours because sharing that vision is important. Oftentimes you have multiple seasons. We can go back and capture a season. So it goes from spring or from summer to winter. Or after we make a FAM tour, we'll end up going back and trying to really capture some big events of this nature. Oftentimes a big event are huge cultural aspects of a community, and you want that as part of your tour. So there you go, there's 250 horses running in Wyoming. Certainly something that's unique to them. Now, when it comes to the building visualizations, this is where I think it gets particularly interesting. So like right here, this is often what a lot of people's sites look like. They tend to be all gravel. But we can make it look like this. So we have the ability to take 3D models. We work with a Hollywood Emmy award-winning 3D effects artist to create photorealistic visions of what might be on a particular facility. And so to be able to go back and forth from your site the way it is now to look how this might look can really motivate a potential consultant or prospect to get a feeling of what that building might be like for them. In this example, you can see this building, you can see a train that's going by right here. You can even see the reflection of the train in the glass. But we put in our own train. That building is not only virtual, so is this track. Here's a proposed spur. You can even wrap it, have the right train on there so that whatever train company might be actually servicing that, you can change that. But you can see it's almost hard to tell which one is the real train and which one is the virtual train used in that facility. That's the kind of realism. And when you combine this with that trick of the brain of visiting a place, it feels like you're visiting a place that doesn't exist. And this gets us into that realm of augmented reality where we're changing what the reality looks like. Say, what happens if you have an existing facility? So that you don't need to have a vision of what it might look like, because it's not a brownfield site, it's not a greenfield site. One of the things that we've been able to use in the kind of data we've been creating includes, let me give you an example, these existing facility building scans. And here's an example of one. This is a Silverliner building. This is in Eastern Kentucky. And on one hand, I can zoom out. It's a specialized camera that lets me take 360 photos through an entire facility so I can walk through it. I can view it in VR, like I'm standing in there. I can also view it through a desktop computer, like right now I'm showing this to you through a web browser. But as it goes through, it makes this 3D model. So all the areas that you can walk through are visible. And I can go right into this building and start walking through it as if I was there. And I can scroll around, I can look all different directions. Especially if somebody can't visit in person, but they're really considering a facility, one of the neat things in this technology is the ability to measure. So I can say, I'm gonna measure the entrance to this to see if the machine that I have is gonna fit in there. And because it makes a 3D model, you can take pretty accurate measurements to make some important decisions. And then if you have a big warehouse area, like in the case of this facility, you can walk through all of the administrative areas, but then in the back, we can go in there and see what that space looks like too. And you can move around from one to another. This is an excellent way to capture existing facilities, and it gives site consultants and prospects a way to explore the building on their own time, as well as a very useful virtual presentation tool where you can go to a part of the building or show a part of the facility that's really relevant to your person you're meeting with or showing this to. So excellent tool to put in the toolkit for existing facilities. But all of this is great. We can put this onto our headsets, but what happens when you can't be there in person? And so one of the things we've been focusing on is how to use the virtual reality technology so that we can visit a place and have a meeting without having to actually travel. So here you can see I'm looking around. Right now I'm inside the lobby of this app. So you'd send a headset to a prospect. They would have a 4-digit code that they would put in. And the vision here, and like this is kind of what Chris was noting about thinking about what's going to happen in the next couple of years. The vision for us is that just like you have a website for your organization, we have a virtual room for your organization. And it has all of your videos and your tours. It has the 3D models and your visions that you want to present, as well as slides. When you first go in and type in your code, you'll see those other avatars. Those are other people with headsets on, and we can meet and we can talk. It's a completely in 3D sound. I'm going to switch perspectives here so you can see what it looks like with me presenting to my guests here. That's me in the gray jacket. So you can see which way they're looking because the headsets are synced to their head, and you can also see what they're, you can hear what they're saying in 3D sound. So if they're on your left side, you hear them in your left ear. It feels like there's a lot of presence, and that's the goal here, is to feel like we're meeting with people in person. Well, here I am, I'm going into York County and taking a look at a 34-acre industrial site, just a greenfield site right now. But in this case, we were able to take the plans from an engineering firm. You can see them right there. We took the actual model and dropped it on the site as they were proposing. And now I'm in here with my guests, and we're all in VR. It feels like we're visiting. And I can make that appear, make that vision appear into their experiences like they're standing there when suddenly pavement goes under their feet and here's a massive logistics center that appears out of nowhere. And I can talk to them about it. I can even have my virtual conference table sitting right here during the meeting to be able to talk to them and share the vision of the site. What a great way to be able to bring people to your community when they can't travel right now. And another thing, you can bring people to places that aren't necessarily safe. Like in this case, the top of a water tower. You probably wouldn't bring your site consultants there, but in a VR setting, it's very safe. And not only that, we can add additional graphics and attach different data and information directly into these videos to communicate the point that we have to make. And so the very last piece here that we'll be showing is you can also have pull-up slides and give a full presentation. This was a slide deck example from a presentation I gave for IEDC. So, and I know that right now, like you look at these avatars, they look a little animated, but it's going to soon look like this. This is a organization called Spatial. This is a new app on the Quest. It literally takes a photo of your face and wraps it around an avatar. And there's a picture of me in a video to show just how accurate these are looking. So although the avatars look a little animated now, this stuff's moving very, very fast. And so in the end of the day, we're going to save a lot of time and money. During COVID, we're going to be able to communicate effectively. And that's really the promise of all of this virtual reality. So we do have an ebook that's available to talk about 5 different rural groups that adopted it and some of their use cases and how they went about it and the benefits that they had. You can check out at placevr.net/ebook. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to present with you, Chris, and you, Russ, and we'll look forward to answering some questions.
Thanks so much, Russell, Chris, and Aaron, for your insight on online data and how it has an effect on economic development. I'd also like to thank once again Daniel and eSolutionsGroup for sponsoring today's session. Now for the live Q&A portion, I would like to invite all of you to join us in the Zoom room. So just click the link below that you see on your screen, and we'll see you all there in a few minutes.